thank you for joining us again today. And we really appreciate you giving up your time to join. My name is Pauline Gallagher, and I'm the CEO of Halcyon & Partners. And this is the latest in our series where we put people on the spot about the different programs and investment opportunities that we have to offer. And what better way to do that than to actually speak to the people themselves. Today, our focus is going to be on the beautiful island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Imelda Manning, who's the director of Mauritius Luxury Homes. So a big warm welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today, Imelda. We really appreciate you giving up your time.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, it's great. Mauritius has always been a popular destination, particularly for South Africans and Indians, and it seems to be growing in interest. So today what we wanted to cover is quite a few topics because it might be new to other people and they may not know very much about it. So we really want to delve a bit into the residency side of things, the real estate market, where to buy, where to live, and how easy it is to maybe set up and run your business there. So there's quite a lot of topics to cover. So perhaps we can start by, if you can explain, what is it that's making Mauritius so popular? Why are people looking to want to come to live there, to retire there? Just what is it about the island that's so appealing?
Sure. There's so many aspects to Mauritius. It's difficult to quickly put that in a sentence and give you one answer on it. But really, just to touch on a few most important things, having lived in Mauritius myself for 12 years and as an expat in Mauritius, I've seen how the island has evolved and how Mauritius has embraced foreign investment and just the development, the opportunities, which are just immense and interesting to see how things are evolving so quickly. Apart from the fact that it is just a beautiful place to live, a beautiful place to have the privilege to be in, to place yourself in. I think it's Mauritius is a paradise island after all. So who wouldn't want to make paradise a part of your life? And then of course the fact that the government is very open to foreign investment and wanting to develop Mauritius as a hub to the rest of the world has really put Mauritius on the map for the last 14 years. So originally quite close to foreign investment and more recently having taken huge strides in making it really attractive from a residency point of view for those that are seeking residency outside of their original country, but also from a work point of view, from an investment point of view, from a retirement point of view. It really is, it offers beauty, it offers a peaceful, beautiful lifestyle. With really beautiful people, and it's multicultural, thriving economy, and so many sectors that in this market that have just recently taken off. So specifically on the financial side, and the IT sector, growing property development sector. There's so much on offer. And I think that's, in a nutshell, very investor friendly.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think the great thing also is that, I mean, you've actually done this move. So, you know, I think it always reassures people when they're talking to somebody who's actually done what they're thinking of doing, then they can relate more to and equate more into the experience that you've had. And you can share your experiences as we go, because it makes it more real to them, if you like. I think you've explained it beautifully about as a place to live. Where would you say on the island, if people are looking to move there, where would you say are the best places to live? Where should they be looking for? What sort of area?
For those that don't know Mauritius, we have the airport situated in the south of the island, and then the main hub of Mauritius, I would say the capital, is in this kind of in the center. And then generally, historically, I think we've all known, for those that know Mauritius and have known Mauritius for even prior to living here, for instance, as a holiday destination, your west coast and the north coast have always been the popular sort of holiday made areas. And so those areas have developed with amenities and obviously everything else that you need when you live in a place permanently. So I think naturally those areas have developed a lot quicker. And also from a weather point of view, we have a kind of wind and our rain comes from the southeastern side of the island. So your west and your north is more protected really as well from that point of view. That doesn't mean that those areas are not developing and that they will not develop in the future, but where your comforts are, your amenities right now would be either on the west coast of Mauritius or the north of Mauritius. And I would really say that the north, with the ease of getting to the capital and to the airport, with a highway, a new highway that is now right up to the north into Grand Bay, makes it very accessible, and certainly is a very picturesque part of the island with several beautiful beaches. So I would always say north is first, west is second, but of course the whole island is beautiful too.
Some people might be working as well, so they might want to be actually in the capital. But I'm presuming the distances, how long would it take you to get from, say, Grand Bay to the capital? How, if you were working in the capital, could you live in one and commute?
Definitely. I think there are a lot of people that are doing that. So if you live in the north, for instance, it would take you 20 minutes to half an hour, depending on the traffic. So that's very accessible on a main highway directly into the capital. And then we've also got a few smart cities, which is where there's a lot of business, commercial, new development as well, situated around Port Louis. So again, it take you about 30 minutes, 45 minutes perhaps. So a lot easier from the north rather than from the west, which does not have the direct access at this point. So that would take you probably, 45 minutes to an hour, for instance, at this stage, typically. But we're also seeing a situation where a lot of companies are moving out of the busy capital and now setting up business headquarters, for instance, around Grand Bay in the north. So there's a movement of kind of office buildings and developments as well.
Yeah, so a 20-minute commute is a nice time. So it's not taking very long at all, regardless. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's always flowing as well. We have a unique situation in Mauritius that there are no robots really. So you have circles, and there's always a flow of traffic. So there's no real stop-start. In your peak times, you would have your traffic officers that would direct the traffic, but it flows most of the time. So it really is a very good, easy way of getting around. Yeah.
But what about getting to Mauritius then? How good is the access? So actually flying in, is it good access for people? What are your sort of main hubs that you fly in and out from and to?
Yeah, Mauritius has always had a very good connection with Africa, South Africa, which would be the closest major continent, and then obviously Mauritius is seen as a part of the SADC countries. So in fact, there is a very strong connection, and there's only a 4-hour distance between Mauritius and a flight to Johannesburg. But the historical connection with Europe, and specifically France and the UK, has created the frequency of flights directly from Paris and from the UK, out of Heathrow. So the connections have always been good, but more recently we are seeing Mauritius truly becoming a hub to the rest of the world. And so we've got daily flights in from everywhere else. So you might want to think of Australia, and obviously from Dubai, so Emirates, Air France. We've got interest now again from Austrian Airlines. We are looking to continue to service the routes between London and Mauritius, so that's British Airways. And yes, there's very good connections, and that will certainly continue into the future as well.
Yeah, because I'm certainly finding the people that we're talking to, where they may be wanting to, their work might be somewhere else, but they want to come and go. So the access is quite a key factor for them. They might be spending 6 months of the year in Mauritius, 6 months somewhere else. Particularly if the routes in through Dubai are, for them, a very easy access routes, maybe back into India. The fact that there's easy access makes it very attractive for these people that are still running their businesses. I mean, about getting work, how easy is it to get work in Mauritius? Or is it more about a matter that you can set up your business there rather than actually be employed?
I think that has evolved from a business employment point of view. I think there's wonderful opportunities depending on certain sectors, for instance. But we are seeing a great need for skilled professionals on the financial sector side, on the IT side, of course, the medical field, property development side. There's obviously, with a growing economy, there are all sorts of new opportunities. opportunities. So certainly, I think being employed or the opportunity to be employed is very good. You need to have specific skills for the government to consider foreign employment over local employment, obviously, but certainly the opportunities are there. And then setting up of business is equally attractive for many people these days because of the tax benefits, and relatively easy as well if you come with a business plan and something that, where the government feels that would bring value to the island, and obviously employ some of the local people and upskill the local people. So yes, I think both. And so really from an employment point of view, self-employment point of view, or starting business and entrepreneurial point of view, all of those boxes would be ticked. And it's just a case of having the right guidance and engaging with the right people like ourselves to guide you through the process.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think a lot of people, they might be thinking about maybe wanting to move with their family for various reasons, but they may have a business in their home country, say in South Africa, but they want to continue running in it from Mauritius, or they might want to set up a business in Mauritius and the likes, to know that it's a relatively easy process to be able to do that. Or as you say, because the new industries are coming in, the more service industries, the fact that people are working from home a lot more, then it's very open to attracting that sort of person. So I think this is all appealing to people to get the quality of life, but still know that they can run or work from that particular place.
You're absolutely right, Pauline. And, more recently, the government, specifically with the scenario of working remotely, recently launched the premium visa application as well, where individuals can come and place themselves in Mauritius and their families, and they can actually work remotely from Mauritius, so not allowed to work in Mauritius as long as you're working remotely. But obviously you are supporting the economy and at the same time enjoying the lifestyle and the accessibility to the world. So that is a really a positive move as well for people wanting to work remotely.
Yeah, I think because there seem to be, from our perspective, when we're talking to people, you've got the people that want to come and retire or semi-retire. They may still be coming and going, but they want a base where they're ultimately going to come and live and retire to. And then you have the family. The work situation is really important. The tax situation is really important. And also then the other things like education and healthcare for the children particularly. And the medical, is the medical free? Or is it a private medical system that you have to pay into?
It's for foreign nationals, it would be a private medical.
Okay. Yeah. So if we can perhaps come on to the residency then side and the real estate. So we're really going to major more on the residency application related to actually acquiring property. There are other options that we can cover. And again, we can cover that at a later date. But how do you go about obtaining residency? So you're moving there with your family, you're moving there because you want to retire, but you want to take residency. What do you have to do?
One would have to invest in a property. Mauritius has recently, since basically the last 2 years, they've made it even more attractive for residency purchase of property, the possibility to obtain residency via purchasing a property. So the minimum required to spend on a purchase of a property would be $375,000
okay.
Opposed to $500,000, which it was in the past. And so that certainly is driving a lot more interest, even though there was a lot of interest. We're seeing a lot more interest in terms of the residency entry-level property side of things. And so that would give you and your family, your spouse, permanent residency in Mauritius. So I think we have to be clear that it's not a passport, it's not citizenship, it's a permanent residency. You would have the residency for as long as you own the property. So it's attached to the property. And if you sold the property, you would lose the residency with the property. So for as long as you own the property, you will have a permanent residency. You can come and go and leave and return as much as you would like, and spend whatever amount of time you would wish to spend in Mauritius for as long as you own the property. So some people would do that, obtain the residency, and perhaps put the property on a rental for a number of years if they would like. We have a lot of situations where people might still work abroad, but it is their intention to eventually live in Mauritius and perhaps retire in Mauritius, or they just would like to know that they have the residency there and we'll see what happens down the line. There's no requirement for a minimum period that you need to be living in that property at this stage. So it's pretty open. And that makes it really very attractive as well, because there is also a need for residential rental properties. That makes it attractive to be able to put that property on a rental perhaps and have a rental income to cover your costs until such time that you might want to live in that property. So just to go back, that would be for you and your spouse, but we currently, the government has recently announced that they might also include one's children and your parents as well, to be able to live on the island if you have the residency. The scenario currently, so we're waiting for the final approval of that, but the current scenario is that it would be you and your spouse, whoever's purchasing the property, and then for your children up until the age of 24, basically, if they're still dependent on you, would fall under your residency as well. But we're looking to get some feedback on that being approved, that your children will enjoy the residency with you for as long as you own the property.
Okay, and then how long does it take to get the residency?
It depends. If a property is purchased that is a completed property, then obviously we can make that application to the government immediately based on the property that is existing. And just to make very clear as well, Pauline, these properties will not be freestanding properties just anywhere on the island. It has to be in a government pre-approved development for foreign purchase for residency. So, we would refer to those as either a PDS development, which stands for Property Development Scheme Development, or you might have heard of IRS development, which is an Integrated Resort Scheme Development. Now, those are earmarked specifically and approved by government for foreign purchase that would give you residency. A lot of people make the mistake in thinking that they would be able to buy a freestanding property on the beach, for instance, and just look for property anywhere. So that's not the case. But certainly you have a whole variety of options within the IRS, PDS, and some might be smaller developments, more exclusive, and others larger developments on a golf estate, for instance. Some might be on the sea and have sea access, and some might be a little bit more inland and that type of thing. So, yeah, when it comes to residency options, I think it's very important to be guided in terms of area, location, what these various developments have on offer, and to really do a good comparison between the various price ranges that there are.
Yeah, and I think the important thing that you're saying there is that the residency, it comes with the purchase. So as soon as you have a contract to sale, effectively, you can make your application to apply for your residency, and it comes through quite quickly. The directive is as soon as you have the property and you sign a contract of sale, then the residency can actually proceed. But it has to be on one of these designated areas that are actually approved by the government. But there are a multitude of those to choose from at different price points. I think the other thing as well is just to point out that if somebody then wanted to go into citizenship, so they did want a Mauritian passport, how long does it take for them to do that? I do also understand that they have to actually make an investment of 500,000. Is that correct, to obtain their citizenship?
At this stage, that is not confirmed, Pauline. All of these things are on application. So I think, the most important, the clear residency aspect right now is really in terms of a residency purchase in order to obtain permanent residency. And even that is on application. The one thing about Mauritius, and I think it's a very good thing, is the fact that every single foreign purchase, residency, property purchase is approved by the government, by the Prime Minister's office. So Mauritius is very clear on doing the proper screening and not getting themselves into a situation where they could have a bad reputation. So certainly that is it's very strong in this market where everything needs to be approved. And I think once you've resided in Mauritius for a number of years, you can certainly make application. But at this stage, there's no specific amount of investment, or that has not been finalized. I can certainly not say that there would definitely be an opportunity for citizenship down the line at any stage. The 500,000 that you might be referring to might be in a case where more recently it has been approved that if you buy a beachfront property, you spend or on a ground +2, which is another offering. So you have your PDS, as I said earlier on, your IRS, but then there's also another property investment option, which is classified as a ground +2. And what that is really your smaller apartment, literally ground floor +2 levels, which when it was first launched, it did not offer residency as such. It was just for pure investment purposes. So for instance, if we had an investor that didn't need the residency, but they would still see Mauritius as a good property investment opportunity for a rental on a return on rental basis, your apartment kind of investment would always be attractive like anywhere around the world. And that ground +2 option did not come with residency initially. And more recently, we've also had where the government announced that if one spent $500,000 and above on a ground +2 development, that would also give you the residency option.
Okay, so well, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, but not citizenship at this stage, no.
Okay, so you mentioned that you keep your residency for as long as you have the property, but can that then be hereditary? So can it pass down through the generations? So as long as the property is there and the property then passes to the children or whatever, then you keep the residency?
Absolutely. Okay. So that property would be passed down to the children, correct?
Okay. Excellent. So as long as the property is there, then it just keeps going, but you have to maintain the property. That's excellent. So the money to make the investment, does that have to come from the investor? So the one that is actually making the application, are they the one, does it have to come specifically from them, or can it come from some other source?
You mean personally?
Yeah. Sorry? Yes, does it have to come from their personal funds? So from their bank account, from their own investments, rather than from, say, a family member or somebody else that might have actually be making the investment for them. Where does the money have to come from? Is there any particular requirement stipulated?
I think that's a really good question, Pauline. So just to cover that side of things, yes, definitely. If you require the residency to be for yourself, you would have to have the property registered in your name, and you would have to pay for the property. The other way of doing this, so there are a few options. You can either have the property registered in your own name, and if it is in your own name, then that obviously the residency would be for you and your spouse at this stage. But you may always also purchase the property in a company name. So if you have a trust, for instance, that is something that comes up very often, and the trust can own the property as well, but only one person in the company or the trust will get the residency. So if you have 2 directors in a company or 2 members in a trust, for instance, one would have to choose who is going to get the residency. So not all the directors or all the members.
Okay.
So you can have a local Mauritian company owning the property, or via the trust. If you have a trust anywhere in the world, that trust will be able to own the property. Okay. And we also guide when it comes to that. Certainly there would be certain rules attached to that, and so I think that is very important. It's all very well to be able to share what is on the market in terms of property availability, but all of these things are equally as important in terms of your property purchase and eventually getting your residency.
Okay, so if the funds are needed for making the investment, can you secure a loan to get that and then still apply for residency? So say, for example, you might have a certain amount of capital, but then you want to take out a mortgage or a loan to do that, either in your home country or in Mauritius. Is that possible and still be able to apply for residency?
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, as long as you qualify in terms of the entry level and above, so purchase a property of $375,000 US or above in one of those pre-approved residential schemes, then certainly you can either apply in your own country for a loan, you can apply locally as well. And the government regulation on that is that any foreigner can apply for a loan of up to 70% of the property price. So it also depends, that is not cast in stone, it depends on age, it depends on your specific situation. So one needs to go through the normal approvals of the specific banks, and they will determine what they would be willing to lend. But generally, that is where we're sitting at. So you would have to come up with 30%, worst case scenario, or best case scenario, and 70% of the property price can be financed. And we can also assist with that in terms of putting our clients in contact with the banks. And I think it's also very important to mention here that the banks would look at the area. So where is the development going to be constructed? Is it in a good area? In terms of a risk assessment, the normal kind of thing. And a particular developer, have they successfully developed and delivered previous developments and so on. All of that is very important, but we understand all of that really well. So when we guide people, that's part of the process.
Yeah. If they were going to buy something that maybe hadn't been built, so it's being bought off, so then they are going to place a certain amount of money down, and it's then on a stage payment to delivery. But when they've completed the contract of sale, so they've basically said, yes, I'm going to buy this property and I have a contract of sale, but they've only paid maybe 30% of the money, can they still make their application for residency, or do they have to wait until they've actually paid the full amount for the property?
No, not at all. So if it's an off-plan purchase, which I think happens most of the time, I think in Mauritius really, at this stage, because it's a relatively new market. So what would happen is, it would depend when you enter the purchase or the reservation in terms of the off-plan development. So let's say, for instance, and just to explain that, so a development cannot go ahead. Again, this is completely part of the regulation in terms of the Mauritius government when it comes to foreign purchase, in order to protect the foreign investor. Again, because Mauritius wants to have a good reputation, and we don't want any unfinished development standing around and unhappy investors. So there is a requirement that a development or a developer needs to sell once their development and all their initial business plans and development plans and so on have been approved by the government. Then they need to go to market and they need to sell either 60 or 70% of the development before they can start construction.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that at 60-70% of sales, there is a bank guarantee that would kick in, which means that if there's a default or anything goes wrong in terms of the development, the bank will actually step in and complete the development. So the purchasers have security. And so that is very important. So to go back to your question in terms of the approval by government, so what happens is obviously your sales start happening, and then you would have to make a reservation if you get in at that point. If you're interested in a specific unit, you would pay your deposit, which is usually between 5 or 10% of the property price. You would have to put that down to reserve that particular unit. When the sales get to 60 or 70%, then can a developer apply to the government for the actual approvals of those purchasers that have made the purchases or that have reserved. So at that point, once the government gives approval, then you immediately get a letter from the government stating that they have approved you as a foreigner purchasing property in Mauritius. And then construction would start. And then normally about 3 months after that, would you get your title deed. And with title deed, you would get your residency. So in other words, your residency would happen somewhere along the line in terms of construction, and not only at the end of the actual build and delivery.
Okay, perfect. And do you physically need to actually come to Mauritius to take your residency, or can this be done remotely, given obviously the restrictions we have on travel now with COVID? Is it something that can actually be done remotely, or does the person actually have to?
What we've had with COVID, where we've had a number of clients, obviously, that had made their purchases and now they're sitting back in their own country. And so certainly, even with title deed, we have been able to do that by means of proxy. We have been given power of attorney by all our clients, and obviously all that documentation would be sent to the client first to really have a look through, and once they're happy for us to sign off, we would sign off on a power of attorney on a title deed, for instance. And at that stage, when they get their residency, that is also, you're able to send that on in a form of a letter, which is a registered letter. And then when the next time the client gets to Mauritius, and you can travel with that letter to Mauritius as well to show at the airport, for instance, if you've now taken delivery of your property and you want to come and live in Mauritius permanently, you can then buy a one-way ticket as such and prove with that letter that you have purchased the property and you've got your residency. So you wouldn't really need to buy a return ticket if that is something you wanted to come and place yourself in Mauritius.
Permanently, yeah.
But there is also a residency card which normally follows that approval letter, the residency document, which is a documented A4, 2 or 3 pages. So there's a residency card that you would normally carry with you when you travel, and that you will then come and collect once you're back in Mauritius.
When you travel.
So all the steps are covered, and between ourselves and the developers, we work very closely with the economic, the EDB, which is the Economic Development Board, and is part of the government of Mauritius. So we really walk the complete road with every single client to make sure that is all covered and made easy.
Okay. Just on the point of where they're putting money down, so they're putting maybe 5 to 10% down, and then they're waiting till 60% of the project is actually sold before they're then going to do their contract. And at that point, then that's when the government is going to say yes or no to their residency. You mentioned that the government is quite strict. What is the refusal rate then in Mauritius? How many, do you get cases where people are rejected? And obviously, if they have, then they put money down on a project. Do they get that money back? What happens?
Absolutely. Good question. Yeah. So, look, the government reserves the right to refuse anybody that they would be concerned about. However, in your reservation contract, there is a clause that is a general clause that should, for any reason, which I've never had happen in my 7 years of running my business and helping many non-Mauritian, many foreign nationals taking up the residency through a purchase. Property purchase, but the reservation agreement deals with that, and it stipulates very clearly that if for any reason the government should turn down your application for residency or the purchase of a property, whatever it is, that 5% or 10%, whatever the reservation deposit was, would be refunded to you in full. That is, it's not something that attracts any interest on the amount, but certainly you would be recovered.
So you're covered. Basically, you're covered. So if there is a rejection, then you can actually get your money back. So there seems to be protection in terms of the bill. There seems to be protection in terms of the residency, which is good to know, because if you're putting that money in and something goes wrong, you want to know sure you get your money back out again. We touched on it a little bit. You've mentioned about people coming and maybe not going to live there permanently to start with and wanting to rent rent the property out. You did mention, I believe, that the rental market is good in Mauritius in terms of actually the ability to rent your property out. What sort of rental yields are you getting? What is a rental in Mauritius? What sort of returns are people going to get?
Again, like anywhere in the world, it would be location specific. And so I think, again, just to mention the North and the West, certainly those two that I will deal with right now would be where you would get your best rental yields.
Okay.
And that would be both on the perhaps the short-term holiday rental market, or the long-term, let's say, a professional rental, families that come to settle on the island, but they're not ready to purchase property, or they're not interested in purchasing property. So for instance, if you've got a work permit through a company which allows you to have the permanent residency through a work option for while you have that particular work contract, they would generally want to rent properties. So I think in both those areas. So I would say what we're seeing is anything between 4% and perhaps 7%, 8% as a rental return on your investment per annum.
Okay. And presumably you can resell your property and buy another one if you wanted to. So if your property had appreciated, as long as you have a property, it doesn't have to be the property that you actually buy that you then have to keep forever. You could potentially sell that and buy another one, correct?
Absolutely. So if you sold one property, the residency would go with it. So if you wanted to continue to have the residency, you would have to purchase another residency level property. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, but there's no limit on how many properties you could buy. So you could buy to have one to live in, and you could buy others to invest. So you can actually use it as an investment opportunity as well, yeah?
Absolutely. And the question that we get asked a lot is, what if I buy one for myself, buy another one in my name, and give residency to my son or my daughter?
That was my next question.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but certainly you can buy a second property, but it would have to be in the name. It would have to be registered in the
application.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Brilliant. I think we've covered a lot of subjects, a lot of information, I think, through this session. Imelda, is there anything in closing that you'd like to also just mention, maybe that we haven't touched upon?
Yeah, there is one thing. Thanks, Pauline. Just coming back to the sort of safeguarding the investor. I think it's very important when people are buying remote, they're buying in a country where they're not sure how things work. And so if I place money in a development, for instance, that is off plan, what is that going to feel like? Is it something that is safe to do? Is my investment safe? That type of thing. So another thing that Mauritius has put in place, which I think is brilliant, apart from the fact that a developer would need to sell X amount before they can start constructing and that type of thing, and also, the 5%, if you don't get your approval, you will be refunded. The third aspect there in terms of just to give you peace of mind as an investor would be that whatever money is put in at any stage, have to, by law, it needs to be deposited into a notary escrow account. It's a stipulation by government that any of these developments has to have a qualified and a government-approved notary firm that would be linked to that particular developer or development. And that means that from your deposit to any other drawdowns that you would have to make throughout the construction process, because if it is an off-plan property, you would pay that 5%, and then over the construction period, there would be various drawdowns at various times. So there's a payment schedule that is involved, and that would suit a lot of investors that might not have the cash ready. They still need to sell other properties, and so we see this all the time. And very often the off-plan scenario suits the majority of our buyers in Mauritius, especially those that don't need to place themselves in Mauritius straight away. So it's part of a 2-year or a 3 or a 5-year plan. And I just wanted to make clear that all of your payments will have to go into a notary account, and that notary will only release the funds at the various stages when the various steps have been met successfully by the developer. And so there's no such thing where you deposit straight into a developer's account. You have no control, or no one has control over it. And at the various stages of construction, there would be a third party, a professional service that would check on that level of construction and whether it has been completed successfully. There would be a certificate issued that would be communicated to the notary, and only then would the notary release the funds for that particular step. And I think that is so important to mention, because there is that level of control in terms of the standards and what is delivered at the end of the day. And you know that when the funds are called for and they are released, that it's absolutely for your particular property and where the correct stage that it's at. So that's very important. I think the very strict measures to make sure that the experience is good, that there's no funny business going on. And so I really just wanted to make mention
thank you. I really appreciate that, because I think, the most important thing that from, our perspective when we're talking to our clients is this transparency and this honesty, because people are buying remotely, they don't understand the systems, they don't understand the processes, and to know that your money is safe is number one, because as we all know around the world, there have been many scams. The fact that your money is going into an account which is only going to be used for that particular project, the developer can't just take it and then use it for some other project. The controls place are a great reassurance to people when they're actually placing their money into the hands outside of their home country. This is the number one thing I think that we hear all the time: is my money safe? Can I trust people? So absolutely. I think the fact that Mauritius has all of these controls set by the government already in place is excellent. The fact that companies like yourself, like us, our job is to also ensure that we're making sure they take every step correctly. They're doing all of the necessary things, so we're doing the due diligence for them. This is really important, and why we work together with people like yourself who are in a particular country, because more than we do about a particular process or procedure, it's reassuring to the client to know that every step of the way their hand is held, and in Mauritius particularly, that the government also is watching their back as well, which I think is excellent. So thank you. Excellent point to make for everybody. So I think on that note, we'll close it there. And as I said, like, share and subscribe. And thank you, Imelda, once again. It's been fantastic talking to you. I know you've helped a lot of people, and we're looking forward to working with you. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. So thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, Pauline. Thank you.